Hey guys, welcome to another Lifestyle of Eden podcast. I'm your host and founder, Nick Tognetti. And today I have a very special guest, my boy Lawrence or Larry. He is a mentee of mine in my mentoring program. He's a fantastic coach. He's turned into a good friend. He's been like a little brother. He's like a huge prodigy whenever it comes to all of the 7 pillars and the things that I'm teaching. Super excited for this podcast, Larry. Thanks for joining me, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge blessing. Super excited to get into it. I know the pillars have absolutely changed my life and all my clients' lives.
Oh man. Today we're going to jump into, just for the audience to understand, we're going to be jumping into specifically my first pillar on nutrition. I do want to do, I don't know if it's going to be 7 videos on the 7 pillars or a couple of them if we'll combine, but regardless, for those who don't know, I do teach my 7 pillars of disease reversal, prevention, and longevity. I found these 7 pillars, all 7, in detail in the scripture. My business, Lifestyle of Eden, it's the lifestyle of the Garden of Eden. There is a lifestyle that God actually prescribed all throughout the scripture in order to reverse and prevent disease. And these pillars are what I found, not just nutrition, but what to eat within that nutrition and all these other things. Nutrition is only one concept of the 7. And not only that, as everybody knows, I'm very big on the blue zones. In the blue zones, I came to realize they're actually living out my 7 pillars. And so
So,
being able to step into this was really big. And like I said, I know Larry has gotten really passionate about these 7 pillars the more that he's implemented them and so forth. So, Larry, before we dive deep into the different aspects of nutrition and everything, tell me a little bit about your perspective on the 7 pillars so far, kind of the stuff you're continuing to learn. Obviously, it's a continual knowledge base to keep learning. Even me, they're my pillars, and I'm the one that's having to keep learning about the depths of them and everything else, man.
that's the beautiful thing about learning. Obviously, once you open a door, you realize how much more there is to explore. I think with nutrition, growing up, I started in like more of the bodybuilding industry before getting into more functional health. And we have such an emphasis on nutrition and training and thinking those are the two elements. You look at the blue zones, you take into account these 7 pillars, you look into some blood work and learn some of these life stories from some of the clients we work with and start connecting these dots and then viewing these pillars. Even though I didn't know what the pillars were, as I was working some of these functional cases, I was diving into all those pillars.
Yeah,
This gave a clear roadmap and made us conscious about this, and it was really life changing across the board. Main focus on just nutrition and training has been overlooked because truly, as you can work a case, have training nutrition accounted for perfectly, and there's still ways that it can't get solved or reversed.
absolutely. So, with the nutrition aspect, obviously, when we talk about disease, I always like to break it down in simple terms. Is number one, we all say all disease is metabolic, but really, what does that mean? Metabolic literally means it has to do with mitochondria. Every disease has to do with mitochondria, and so just for everyone to get a glimpse, mitochondria obviously is the energy organelles within your cells. You can have thousands of mitochondria in each cell or whatever it is. So let's just put it in the context of kidneys, right? People go, "Oh, they have kidney disease. Their eGFR or their kidney function is lowering. It's not functioning as well." What's going on? The kidneys are slowing down. Are the kidneys slowing down? No, not necessarily. What's happening is the mitochondria within them are actually the energy sources. They are not able to burn fat and sugars efficiently. They're getting damaged, so they're not producing as much, and they're the energy sources. So if the energy source comes down, guess what gets tired? The kidneys or whatever it is. So the kidneys slow down. So that's why we say it all comes down to mitochondria. So when you think about it that way, it becomes much more realistic or practical in regards to reversing. Like when I had stage 3 kidney disease, this was my whole concept. I remember the nephrologist was telling me, he goes, "Nick, I think that you can prevent it from getting worse, but I don't think you'll be able to reverse it." And I said, "I'm going to experiment on myself." And in 8 weeks, completely reversed it. And then you've seen in our mentorship how we've reversed kidney disease, stage 2, stage 3, and stuff like that. But the big thing with nutrition is this has a big part with our mitochondria, because when we eat bad food, our mitochondria get corrupted, they get destroyed, they get bogged down, and they're not able to switch over to either burning body fat, or they're not able to function in general because they're super inflamed, because the food's eating the toxins. Whenever we have the certain toxins, it's raising cortisol and it's causing a stress on our body. It's causing nutrient deficiencies. We actually learn in the book Cortisol Connection how much even just adding B vitamins and things of this nature can lower cortisol and certain nutritional components and so forth. So that's kind of what I want to get into, because 93% as of 2023, I think it's probably higher now, but as of 2023, 93% of America is metabolically dysfunctional, meaning they are unable to burn fat and gain muscle efficiently due to something, whether it's cortisol, adrenals, the same thing, but gut health, hormonal dysfunction, inflammation, autoimmunes, whatever is going on. It doesn't matter. They're inefficient. And fixing nutrition is the first, not the only, but the first pillar that needs to be addressed. And I think that there's just going to be things that we can share today that are going to help people practically to where, hey, getting a coach to get through your issues, I think is great. But I want people before, during, and after the coach to be able to live long lives that you don't need necessarily a coach to tell you what to do. In fact, in Greece,
That's the goal for everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
like in Greece, they're not having all these coaches because it's the stuff we need to do should be common sense.
And they're not tracking food anymore either, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's a big part of it too, which we'll probably end up getting to when we get to stress
Yeah.
management, which is a good one. But it should be common sense. But there's this saying in ministry. We say, hey, it's not always good to have access to excess. And so, for example, if you have access to too much money, you can get yourself in trouble. If I have access to too much women, it can get me in trouble. Access to excess is not a great thing. And we have access to excess here. We can get any food, all these different foods that aren't even found in most other countries. In fact, a lot of our foods are illegal in other countries. And so I say what?
I would say, especially with the ways the like crops are grown and what's sprayed on top of things, I think that's where there's a lot of discrepancy between country to country.
100%.
And we'll dive into
100%.
that for sure. But I think you hit the nail on the head. Every single bite matters in a way. We have hundreds of metabolic pathways. It truly does dictate our genes, our mitochondria, how our microbiome starts building out, how our immune
Yep.
system functions. Every single bite plays a role in more process than we think. And that's why I think a lot of like diet culture focuses so much on if it fits your macros and calories out. We can't always argue that, but there's so much more that goes into it. A body that can actually process the food and utilize it correctly does a
Yeah.
good thing. And that's what I think leads
Yeah.
into hey, you don't have to track every single gram, quality over quantity at some point.
Absolutely. In fact, the whole calories in, calories out, I've actually been one of the, maybe I'm against the grain. I am against the grain here. I actually speak against that. And the reason being is because whenever I got really big back in 2019 through 2022 into fiber and the gut microbiome, for those 3 years, I was just relentlessly studying it. And one of the things that we get to see is, okay, if I take 150 grams of white rice, and then I take 150 grams of black beans, you can have more calories or the same amount of calories. Who cares about the grams? Let's just get the calorie count. The same amount of calories in white rice, same amount of calories in black beans. My body is going to completely respond differently to the black beans. Why? It's not even going to it's not even going to absorb all of the carbohydrates that are in those beans because of all the fiber. And so this is where I always go, man, calories in or not calories out. I disagree with it. Whenever we're eating fruits and we're eating all these different things, number one, your body gets triggered in the brain of you being full. Number one, I'm not going to get that by eating cake. I'm going to overeat the cake. But number two, the fiber content is going to cause two things. You have insoluble and soluble. The insoluble is going to take all of those different carbs and different things, and it's going to pull it out of your body to where you're not even absorbing all of it. Soluble is going to create this film around the microbiome that is actually called the second meal effect. The second meal effect is whenever you eat something with high fiber, call it beans, and then the next meal you eat, and even if it's a bad meal, because of that protective layer, it is shoving food out of your system rather than being absorbed into the system. And so that alone kills the whole calories in, calorie out concept. What are your thoughts on that?
We see it all the time, even with Mediterranean flush that we might utilize in somebody. I had a guy that I was taking, he was eating one meal a day, maybe some snacking, like 1,800 calories. I brought him up, shored up the gut lining, just low hanging fruit
Yeah.
stuff, nothing crazy, adequate fiber, hydration, the morning routine with the aloe vera juice, all that sort of stuff here.
Yeah.
Boom, he's 2,500 calories and he's lost 20 pounds. We haven't touched
Yeah,
the
dude.
2,500 calories.
Oh,
And so
man.
he was doing 1,800 calories for a year and he was stuck and he was building into that kind of that dad bod that we see, that negative effect of everything rolling against
Sure.
here. And reversing that can happen quickly. I'm not saying it's replicatable in everybody, but once you get the body efficiently operating, it's crazy how easy body fat flies off.
Yeah.
It's not
And
meant to be high body fat. Our body knows how to operate. As you preach about, give the body the
100%.
environment. I think that's a the analogy you used with the tree, I think would be really worth sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I say all the time. We don't have to teach our body to do anything. We need to give it the environment to do what it is already knowing and created how to do. I actually just told a client this the other day. I said, hey, we never teach a tree how to grow. I give it the environment to make it grow. And that's all I do. Here's the thing I will say before we get into what foods I think that we need to be eating and all of that. I was actually sitting with an MD yesterday and I had asked her, I said, because we'll end up getting the GLPs. Oh, actually, you know what? We may even talk about that today. There's a good chance. There's a
Yeah,
decent chance we'll
we'll
talk about
smack your mancha.
it. But yeah, so, well, that as well. But even the prescription ones, semaglutides, Ozempics, all those things. So we were talking about that yesterday. And I said, hey, I got a question for you. I go, when somebody comes to you metabolically diseased, they have cortisol for years, they've got this, they've got that, blah, blah, blah. I said, how fast, according to the MDs and according to medical literature, do you notice that we can actually have people metabolically flexible again? Where, hey, we've been working with them, we've been doing this, that, and the other. Now they're able to just burn fat efficiently. They don't need the GLPs, they don't need drugs, they don't need anything. They're totally functioning. And you want to know what she told me? I was mind blown by this statistic because I was glad I got it because now I'm sharing it relentlessly the last couple of days. Is she said the doctors that I studied under, and now as a doctor, what I have learned for every year that somebody is metabolically dysfunctional, which by the way, most people, this is for 6, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I
They're
mean,
jacked up for years.
93% you were saying was pretty on point.
Right. So, like for me, I was jacked up for about 4 years. So she said the statistic is for every year that somebody's jacked up, takes 1 to 2 months for every single year. So if these people have been for 10 years, they're like, hey, they're 47. They were like, Nick, ever since I had my second kid at 34, I've never been the same. That's 13 years. They are looking at 13 to 26 months. And not 13 to 26 months just after that. They're looking at 13 to 26 months of, hey, you've been following my pillars for 13 to 26 months. I had somebody the other day say, hey, Nick, I've been sleeping really great the last week and a half. Why am I not losing weight yet? You've been sleeping for a week and a half. You haven't slept in 10 years. Like first of all, it's going to take that much time after you're already following my pillars because that's what it's taking the body to repair itself. And so I think that that statistic, not only did it blow me away, but I was really encouraged by it because I was like, I think it's good that we have a decent number to give a reality to these people on and say, hey, listen, even for me, when I was metabolically dysfunctional for all those years, it took me several months to be able to start really recuperating my body and getting it
And the
back.
reality is that's pretty amazing. That just shows how amazing the body is. You can treat it not the best for 10 years and still get
Sure.
results maybe within a year. That's an
Absolutely.
incredible ratio.
It
So for
is.
like that's too long, I think changing the perspective is look how many years I've done this. And the fact that I might be able to reverse some of this in half that time period or even less is phenomenal.
Right.
A
Well,
big part of what people don't really mention is kind of what you're hitting on too. People think that our metabolism slows down, everything changes, right? The diet that we start with and what we were in shape with in high school, eating in high school, it's this diet wasn't necessarily great by any means, but the compounding effect of our body continuously feeding poor and poor choices over time, it
yep.
can't keep up with it. It eventually starts to have these negative effects. And it's just like
100%.
the diet in high school didn't screw you up. It's the compounding effect of all these
Yep.
negative choices over the decade.
Yep. Your mitochondria it can take the damage when you're young because it hasn't been damaged for many years. It hits you when you're 40. And it's not that your metabolism just slows down. It's that all of those 30 years of crap have caught up with your mitochondria now. So with that said, man, let's start with protein because everybody loves to talk protein. So when it
This
comes
is a debatable one too. How
It,
high
it,
go.
it is for levels and amounts. But when it comes to protein, man, what are the types of protein that you really like to use with clients that you think is beneficial for not only your clients, but just for the general public, generally speaking, not speaking per case, hey, they have a kidney issue or whatever, just general terms. What do you think are the best proteins to really go into?
I think a variety is the first thing to talk about. Having a variety of amino acids is super essential. So not just sticking with just chicken every day. That's
That's
not very
good.
nutrient dense. I
Yeah.
think obviously they're organic, grass-fed ground beef. We even talked about the kinds that have heart and liver blended in them. Any
Yep.
type of meat that's grass-fed, I think, is a beautiful thing to use. But also a lot of wild-caught fish, and it has a lot of omega-3s and other micronutrients in there, and just mixing things up. I'm not against necessarily whey protein or plant-based protein shakes in general, but that can't be two, three, 4 year meals. We want a wide variety of choices.
Right.
Whether it's some grass-fed red meat, whether it's organic cage-free eggs, some wild-caught fish, some ground turkey, some bison, whatever it may be, just having a variety
Yeah.
of whole quality foods.
No, that's good. I was gonna say, I think the big thing to emphasize, because most people don't know this. In fact, I would honestly, genuinely, from my experience, say 95% don't, is all your fish have to be wild caught. Period. They all got to be wild caught. Most are not wild caught, and so you can
Harder
go.
to find too.
They're a lot harder to find. And so when I go to Sprouts to get my food, I actually did a reel. I have a reel on this. I don't think I've posted it yet. I think it's still on my phone. But what I did was I went and bought the Atlantic salmon, which is farm fresh,
Yep,
and I went and bought the wild caught, which like you can get multiple kinds, but I had a sockeye.
that's the
And
most
and
popular.
and the two, if you looked at it, there was multiple things. Number one, the Atlantic was about 3 times fatter. Okay. It's loaded with toxins, loaded with PCBs. They're fattening up the fish in order to
Coloring it too.
cut. Oh, so that was the second thing. So the second thing was the color. The sockeye was like a deep red. The Atlantic was orange. What's funny is that Atlantic, it actually comes out white, completely white. And if you look at the label on it, it will literally tell you food coloring because only wild caught fish gets that deep red because they eat the algae at the bottom of the sea that
Mhm.
causes their color. The wild caught fish doesn't have that. They're getting loaded with food to get fatter so that you can make more money off of it if you're the fisherman. And it comes out white and they're literally dyeing that salmon with orange food coloring. And so wild caught fish is important. If you're going to do shrimp, do wild caught shrimp, salmon, ahi, mahi.
He's fine. Yeah, I see
Yeah,
that being wild caught for sure.
absolutely. So wild caught, that's got to be the key right there is wild caught. But then you said the other good thing too, which is if you're doing meat, it has to be grass fed, grass finished. It's got to be. I'm not okay with the grains and the corns and all those different things. Like,
Now dive into that because I have some ideas. Right, when we look at just the idea of it's not always about what we're eating, but what are we eating or what do we eat that it's eating,
what
right?
did the thing eat that we're eating?
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. But looking into that too, all the micronutrient stuff that the cow may be able to get from the actual grass, we can
Yeah,
absorb some of that. Some
100%.
people have a lack of vegetables in their diet, but can still get some of those micronutrients through the meat.
100%. In fact, not only the meat, I'm very big on organs.
And
I've
I
been
think
big
the color plays a role too. And actually, in red meat, I look at hunted a deer this year and how dark that was, or like a really quality grass-fed
yeah,
actual meat,
yeah,
much darker red, and we see that.
yeah. Yeah, so the wild caught fish, and then for the eggs, for me, it's organic, corn free, soy free, all those different things. And one of the reasons I'm really big on eggs, the same reason why I'm big on a lot of organs, is actually for menopausal women, especially, is one of the things that we really need for male and female is high levels of choline. Choline is found in every single cell of the body, and it's why a lot of people, when they go through menopause, they start aching, their hair gets brittle, their skin gets brittle. And the reason being is because they're lacking choline. Why? Because what's the precursor to it? Estrogen is a major precursor to developing that. Obviously, menopause, they totally tank with estrogen. But the reason why it's really big is because being able to methylate and going through different methylation systems are very important. And choline and creatine take up a radical amount of methyl donors. And so if you don't have sufficient amounts in order to produce that, your body has to give up so much of its methylation ability to be able to do it to where it can't methylate properly. So having whole eggs and having beef liver and all these things, you start to get these different nutrients. But not only that, the beef liver is loaded with B vitamins and it's methylated B vitamins, by the way. So it's absolutely critical. Same with copper. Like it's loaded with copper, which many people are dealing with adrenal issues. They need vitamin C and copper. So
Mhm.
the organs, we see it all in the scripture. God literally had it as a meal that he would constantly eat in the Torah of Moses, and we're made in his image. So he was giving us dietary qualities that we should be eating. We need to be eating organs. So it's the wild caught, it's the grass fed, it's the organs, it's the whole eggs that are not loaded with soy, all those things. Go ahead. What are your thoughts?
It's one of the few foods that actually has the micronutrients that we want to see that has lasted over this time period throughout life.
Yeah.
We look at an apple, for example, an apple 50, 100 years ago does not have the same micronutrient
Oh
profile
gosh.
today. And some of
No.
our other food choices don't. Just the way they keep reusing some of these crops and the soil is damaged and reused over
Sure.
and over again. We're not getting the same micronutrients as we did in the past. And that's where I think
100%.
organs, some of those tools, if hey, you're a person that wants to replace a multivitamin by any means, that could be phenomenal. But
Absolutely.
nowadays, I would love for where we don't need any supplements. And I know we're on the same page with that. But the way that some of these foods are stripped from such vital sources,
Yeah,
sometimes
they're
you have to
critical.
plug and play a micronutrient like multivitamin, for instance, unless you're able to get some of that stuff from the organs and the eggs and some of the things we hit
Yeah.
on. But I
No,
don't think we
absolutely.
can talk about protein, Nick, without going into, hey, what other sources besides meat? Because your previous timeline being plant-based for a bit, we have to
Yeah.
touch on legumes, lentils, and some of those
Sure.
things.
Yeah, legumes, tempeh, all types of beans. I eat black beans every single day. That's part of my diet. I do like a homemade Chipotle bowl. It's kind of like my one of my lunch meals every single day. But those different types of things are really critical. Here's the other thing that's critical that I actually do in my own diet in my last meal is I'm very big on number one on raw honey specifically and unfiltered, loaded with antioxidants, antifungal, antibacterial, antimicrobial, all these different things. Great for healing in so many areas, but it's loaded with antioxidants, calming the immune system and so forth. But the one that I'm really big on actually is actually raw dairy.
Mm-hmm.
Raw milk and raw
This is a
Parmigiano
great thing to
Reggiano.
touch on, man. Why so many people are lactose intolerant, then you give them raw milk, and it's like, hey, they might actually have the enzymes and bacteria to break down some of that lactose.
Exactly. That's the thing is that when you
Thing.
conventional dairy takes raw dairy and heats it up over 140 degrees. When you heat it up over 140, you burn the enzymes that are in the raw dairy to digest lactose, to where all you're left with is the lactose that we are unable to digest. But if you give them the raw, not only do they have that, but you want to know what it's loaded with? Now, granted, whether it's breast milk from a woman or cow's milk will be a little different on which IG it is, but it's loaded with immunoglobulins, which is fantastic because the studies have shown that the children, they did case studies, countless of them, between kids who had raw milk growing up versus regular milk, and the ones with regular milk had more skin issues, allergies, and asthma. Whereas
And you
these
can
ones,
relate it to even breast milk versus like the formula milk. And like
absolutely,
studies even related in some mental functions as well, neurologically.
100%, 100%. So with the raw dairy, like I do raw Parmigiano Reggiano every single night. That's just part of my diet, about 50 grams for me, but I'll put it in other people's diets too. And one of the reasons too is because number one, it's loaded with calcium. There, and I think I could be butchering this off the top of my head. I think it's 50 grams have 550 milligrams of calcium, which is literally half of the recommended daily value.
Yeah.
So you have
Yeah.
100 grams, you literally fill out your whole day. And what was interesting was the the studies that have come out with cortisol in regards to calcium, when they were giving calcium, their HSD enzyme, which was causing them to store more fat because of cortisol issues, was radically suppressed. And the amount of weight loss was 70% more just by having proper calcium intake. And so what they were doing was they weren't even really supplementing the calcium. They were giving them regular dairy. I was like, imagine if you gave them raw dairy that's still having lactobacillus and different enzymes and all these other concepts.
Such good points there.
But what about, let's talk too a little bit about organic versus non-organic. Where do you stand on that? What are your thoughts?
Obviously, organic is huge. Affordability comes into the picture, but look, if you're eating out multiple times a week, if you have a farmer's market close to you, getting organic, grass-fed stuff or just organic in general is definitely doable. It is worth the pennies that you're going to pay extra and the dollars you may pay extra. You have to think of it as in you can either pay that now or you pay that later. We're trying to clean up the mess
Right,
in the future. But you touched on it before. Other countries don't even allow some of these herbicides, pesticides, and different things. They're spraying different types of weed killers on our crops, and that not only
right.
the micronutrients from it, but also fills us with tons of toxins, leading to some of these metabolic dysfunctions.
I was gonna say, you know what's interesting? There's a doctor, I can't remember the name of her. I have the book in my library, but she came out and she was talking about the reason for weight loss resistance in regards to mitochondria. And she said, in all of her studies, it has not been what we have commonly thought. She said, we think it's because our body doesn't know how to switch over to switching body fat anymore. What she found was that our fatty tissue, our fatty acids, are supposed to be filled up with healthy fats. But now, because of herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, and seed oils, she said, number one, those actually get stored in your adipose tissue. They've got to stay somewhere. They go to your adipose tissue. They don't dwell in muscle or anything like that. They sit in your fat tissue. And she said what would happen was when somebody would start eating right or they'd start working out or dieting, whatever it is, they start releasing fatty acids. And those fatty acids are now loaded with all of the seed oils and pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, the stuff that they're cooking your food in at the steak restaurants and all these other things. And when your mitochondria burns up sugar and then it switches over to fat, every time it digests and burns up this fat, it's getting damaged by all of the seed oils. And so, what she found, the mitochondria as a protective mechanism started saying, hey, we're no longer burning fat because every time we do, we get damaged by all these outside sources. So, to me, getting those things out of your diet, out of your lifestyle is going to be critical for your mitochondrial health so that your body doesn't have to continue burning those up. But the chances are 80% of our fat is loaded with those things. So in the meantime, what you really have to do is you're going to have to burn that fat and get those things out of your system. You're going to have to damage the mitochondria, but then you're going to have to go through a season of healing them and going back and forth with autophagy and all those other things. To me, I'm like a big person against pesticides and always eating organic. I pay the extra dollar, but I do it.
You have to. And honestly, some of that stuff can sit in us for years. It's one of the few compounds that can literally sit into our fat cells for years and years. It's not something you quickly turn the page over and go 4 weeks later, I'm eating healthy and everything's back to normal. Those fat cells are going to be filled and lodged with it, like you talked about. We have, even when eating a healthy diet, we have a few reasons why we come into fat loss stalls, and that's one of the huge culprits, quite honestly. And I
Yeah.
think touching on going through a 8, 12, 14-week period and then making sure to go, we've done some of this damage and reversing some of that into heal, pulling back a little bit, keeping the fat loss accelerated. And what you touched on before is not waiting till we hit that stall. Jump ahead of it because we're educating, we know this kind of stuff. How can we prevent some of those weight stalls, keep the client eating more, continuously progressing in the future? And that's when you can,
Yeah.
okay, I think this is a good point to start healing the mitochondria, do some of this reversing and back up the door a little bit.
100%. No, I completely agree with that. And just real quick, because I flipped to this page, I didn't want to butcher the words of this doctor on cortisol. But whenever he starts talking about calcium, how we're talking about the raw dairy. Number one, raw dairy is illegal in 37 states. Why? It's because it's stupid. That's why.
Same with a lot.
It's literally so stupid. But you can find raw cheese. Raw cheese isn't illegal, but raw milk is in 37 states. So, like in Texas,
Makes no sense.
no, it's the dumbest thing on the planet. But I know people, like, you can just go to rawmilk.com and you can find anywhere near you, whatever state you're in, and find raw milk. But raw Parmigiano Reggiano, those things are found. But anyway, what he says is Purdue researchers found that the difference between consuming 1,000 milligrams a day of calcium versus 500 milligrams a day was as much as 20 pounds of body fat in 2 years, raising up calcium intake. And then another one was there was another nutritional journal that came out in an editorial, and by simply increasing calcium intake to 1,000 to 1,500 mgs a day could reduce obesity in the population by 60 to 80%. So I'm real big on raw dairy. So is the Bible. Genesis 18, Abraham fed his three guests with raw dairy specifically. What we see in Hebrew, you can't really see it in English, but in Hebrew. And so I'm real big on that. But no, back to the organic thing. I'm real big on it. Like I said, I pay a little extra for it, but also the nutrient density is going to be more. Like you were mentioning earlier, Dr. Pat Luce talks about in his book, Seven Systems Plan, that the amount of vitamin A that we got from one peach in 1953, we now, this was back in 2017 when this was being studied, but according to 2017, we have to have 51 peaches to reach the vitamin A and RDA of what we got in 1953 by one peach. That's how depleted our crap is. Okay.
It sucks. That
It's
part sucks, man.
it's so bad, bro. And so this is where supplements and proper things like that are needed here, but they're not needed in other countries. Blue zones don't take fish oils. They don't take any of that stuff because they don't need that. So I think ideally, once you get somebody healthy, you can start to taper them off of certain supplements and whatnot. But unfortunately, we're so depleted here in the United States. So you have to go organic. You have to go farm to table. You've got to go all these things from the pesticidal content, but also just simply from the nutrient density content.
1,000%.
So here's the next one that I think is going to really flip people's boats right now when they hear this. And I know that you've adopted this more and more too. I'm not a real big fan of vegetables, of a lot of vegetables. I'm not against vegetables, don't get me wrong. There's certain vegetables like onions. I'm really big with Allisons, like garlic, things like that. Cucumber, that's fine. Leeks, totally cool with that. But when it comes to vegetables, I, for me, I've always told people this. The reason I got an apartment last year in Greece was because I told people hey, listen, if you're a nutritionist in the United States, you don't know nutrition. And I said, if you only know nutrition from your stuff in the United States, meaning you've never traveled around the world, you never studied outside context and sources and really got reality checks in other countries, you genuinely are probably brainwashed to a perspective that you have to learn here.
Yep.
And so I started asking the question a while back, like, why do we need vegetables? Do we really need vegetables?
You
Because,
always hear, eat your fruits and vegetables. Eat your fruits
dude,
and vegetables.
absolutely, bro. And it's like, what's crazy is in so many people, including myself at different seasons in my life, vegetables have actually caused or exacerbated a lot of gut issues in autoimmune situations. And so for me, what I started doing, I did what was called the Bible diet, where I just said, hey, you know what? I'm going to go Genesis to Revelation. I'm going to find every single food that has or has not been listed in the Bible. And it doesn't mean if it's not in there that you can't do it, like rice or whatever. But I was like, I'm going to go pretty biblical here and just get that perspective. And I started going through it and I was like, dude, there's all these fish, all these meats, all these organs, all this dairy, all these fruits. And I said, I found like 4 vegetables. And it was onions, leeks, cucumbers, legumes. We know that Jacob made a lentil stew for his brother Esau. But then in the book of Kings, we have squash, but actually the squash was actually in a bad context. It was poisonous. They ate the squash and they were poisoned because the wild squash had poison in it. But there's
Crazy.
not really tons of vegetables. And so I started going, why are they telling us we need them? 2 reasons are what they're saying: antioxidants and fiber. And I'm like, dude, if you really want high antioxidants, I go, dude, let's go fruit
Fruit
and honey.
baby. Fruit baby. Yep.
Fruit is loaded with it, dude, completely. And I go, if you want fiber, once again, fruits and legumes. Legumes are absolutely loaded with fiber. And so when I started pulling a lot more vegetables out of my diet, like me, every day I have garlic, I have onions, I'll have leeks, I might have cucumber or whatever, but I don't do a ton of vegetables. Not that I never have them. If I'm at a really good place like Salada or Snappy Salads up in Dallas, I'll get a big loaded salad because I love the way they do it. No problem there. If I'm at a steakhouse, I'll get them to do the caramelized Brussels sprouts or whatever.
But
But
notice they're cooked, and that's another thing to cook on.
that was what I was going to say, was the times that we see these types of vegetables, like when Jacob is making a lentil stew, these are cooked. And the reason being is we even can scientifically prove this, that cruciferous vegetables, we're talking about kales, horseradish, broccoli, cauliflower, these things, they actually say if they're raw, damage thyroid function. But when they're cooked, they don't damage thyroid function. And the reason being is, can you imagine when God created the heavens and the earth and gave it to Adam and Eve? Can you imagine Adam and Eve going, oh man, that dry lettuce on that tree, yum, let me grab that and eat it? No,
That raw piece of broccoli just.
dude. Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to just chew on that.
And then
That
we see always at like social events and like home parties, they'll have that board full of you have your carrots, your tomatoes, your broccoli, your bell
the
peppers,
ranch
that type of
dressing in the
stuff.
middle of it.
Yes, exactly. And that's just, oh, we're healthy today. This is our appetizer for the Super Bowl. And it's all raw vegetables. Everybody's
Yeah.
walking around gassy, bloated, and they're just like, hey, what's going on here?
Yeah, bro. I'm telling you, I'm such a questioner and rebellious person when it comes to the common norm, and was just kind of, is this really true? And I started just going, dude, I'm noticing the more that I start to pull that out and add more fruits and add more of this, that, and the other, autoimmune system stuff started calming down, gut issues started calming down, gas and everything started going away. The gut started being able to repair. And so I always tell people, if you're going to do vegetables, be careful on the veggies. You don't need to overload them, load on them, but make sure they're cooked. Also, the whole, like, whenever I was a vegan for all those years, and the whole raw vegan movement thing, I was like, dude, like y'all are going way too far. Like you don't have to be raw vegan, and that's my stance on it. I get that it's not popular, but at the same time, my stance may not be popular, but I don't think it can actually be genuinely rebutted.
And it's like the phrase that you taught me, it's chew the meat and spit out the bones. We can take that into life as mentors and everything else, but also, okay, what are we getting from these vegetables? Can
Yeah,
we chew up the meat and spit out the bones here? Absolutely. We can
yeah,
as these for fruit and other fiber sources like legumes. So
absolutely.
look, if we can not have some of these negatives and still fill it with the positives, and
Yeah,
fruit, as we know, a lot, even in gut protocols, a beautiful tool to plug and play into because you're getting those
100%.
vitamins, you're limiting some of those free radicals, you're filling the body with fiber, you're keeping them full, all those
Right. You think about too, like for me, I love making like a homemade Chipotle bowl. I'll do like black beans, I'll do some chicken breast, I'll do or steak, I'll do brown rice, and I'll do peppers, bell peppers, and onions. I cook all that up and everything. And you've got that. But whenever I have constipation issues with client, not myself, but with clients, One of the things I notice almost every single time actually is I'll say, hey, they're eating vegetables, not having a bowel movement. But then I'll say, hey, why don't you go have one big fruit bowl, like 500 grams of apples or whatever you want? Boom, bowel movement.
Dude, same here. I was stuck on a case and I was like, you know what? Let's just throw in a fruit smoothie. Throw
Yeah.
some fruit juice in there, throw 300 grams of some berries in there, and then boom, bowel movement right away.
Right, dude, I'm telling you. I like I said, I don't think it can really be argued. I think that we just take what we hear and go, "Oh, no, you need your fruits and vegetables." Why? Nobody can really even tell me why you need fruits. Now, I can. Fruits are critical. Whenever I ask people, it's not like they can really tell me because the fiber. And I'm like, there's different kinds of fiber. Number one. Number two, you're loaded with fiber and all these other concepts. And nothing of these things are going to have more fiber than beans if we're going to really try and go at it. Like you get
Mhm.
7 grams of fiber in a half cup. I can get a half cup of broccoli and get half a gram of fiber. Like you're getting nothing, like hardly. You got to eat a lot of broccoli to get tons of fiber.
And that element of prevention of heart disease and some reduction in overall health markers in the future with even just fiber, a cup of beans a day can be huge.
Actually, so this was one of the stats that I learned when I was a vegan was half a cup of beans, which is about 130 grams, is you get 7 grams of protein, but you also get 7 grams of fiber. Did you know for every 7 grams of fiber that somebody eats, they lower their risk of heart disease by 9%? Every 7 grams. So what I used to do when I was living in, which by the way, heart disease, coronary heart disease, and cardiovascular disease is the number one killer in the United States. 400,000 deaths a year. Every 83 seconds, somebody is dying of heart disease. And so it's a 100%, by the way, preventable disease. 100%. It's not genetic. It's 100% preventable. And so what I used to do in Iowa, when I learned this statistic, I remember I was telling my little brother in Iowa, with all my stuff as a vegan, and I was eating goji berries, and I'm eating this, and I'm eating that. I remember I got up to, we were filming one day, and on film, without, it wasn't bothersome at all. It was perfect. I had about 130 grams of fiber, and which is like crazy high,
That's a
right?
lot.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It's 5 times the recommended
And
value.
I think I'm sure you're gonna hit on this, but telling people to work up to that. If you jump up
Sure.
high fiber, you
Oh,
could.
dude, I would have died if I just started that. Yeah, I would have
Yeah.
died. Yeah, I'd literally die. No, you've got to work slowly. When I add beans into someone's diet, I usually start at 50 grams
Mhm.
and then I
Yeah.
work my way up and up. But the reason I said that was because I was making a joke that I said I literally have a negative. If you go 7% or 7 grams of fiber drops your coronary artery by 9%. I said I'm at a -% to ever get cardiovascular disease because of all the fiber that I'm actually eating. But easy ways to really just prevent these very preventable concepts that are just plaguing our country. Here's the other thing that's interesting, and this is actually in the book Cortisol Connection. So what they found, anybody who knows me knows I'm really not a fan of keto. I'm pretty bold against it. People want to go keto for autophagy. I'm like, then fast, like just water fast. There's nothing better than water fasting. That's the only reason why you're doing it. You're taking out antioxidants. You're totally just you're stressing the body. And what he found in here was when people have too low of protein, it spiked their cortisol. And the reason being is because now it's having to break down amino acids from your muscle, which is a stressful concept. And then he said, when you don't have sufficient amount of carbohydrates, it spikes cortisol. When they raised protein, cortisol dropped rapidly. When they raised carbs, cortisol dropped rapidly. He said, when we did studies with high fat diets, he said their body was not able to restore back to normal cortisol levels.
But we
Which
know the correlation to thyroid as well. There's so many elements carbohydrates come huge in. You give somebody some sleep issues, maybe even 40 grams of oatmeal before bed, and they're sleeping like a baby.
100%. So I feel like it's just an interesting concept that I'm not a huge fan of the high fat diets. I never have been, but to even see that on in scientific literature that they're saying, hey, we're doing these high fat diets and we can't lower their cortisol back to normal was absolutely foundational to
And where do we see those diets work the best? When they're throwing things in like the raw honey, like the fruits, and they're adding some of these other aspects to it.
100%. Absolutely. Absolutely. No, so that's good. I feel this pillar, it's funny. I tell people, oh, and then for whole grains and carbs, like same thing as far as organic goes. I think oatmeal's good, rice is good. I actually do more fruit for carbs or like brown rice. I don't really do like a ton of other things. I'll do potatoes sometimes because I like doing a grass-fed meat, like a beef or steak with eggs and like a potato hash. I'll throw red potatoes into it or something. Purple sweet potatoes, I'm really big on too.
Japanese purple
Uh,
sweet potatoes are phenomenal.
yeah, bro, those are fantastic. They can trigger a lot more gut issues in people though. So I notice rice works a lot better or red potato than sweet potatoes just for the general public. But antioxidant profile wise, purple sweet potatoes have 10 times more antioxidants
I
than
use a lot of quinoa in plans as well, obviously depending on gut tolerance and fiber amount they need. But quinoa, I think, is a great alternative to jasmine rice for some people,
no,
especially
I agree.
blood sugar control.
No, I like jasmine rice, jasmine white rice. Now, it doesn't have all this nutritional stuff, but I don't care. Honestly, it tastes good. And I'm like, I'm eating everything else really good. I'm not going to die because I'm having this jasmine white rice. No, I agree. Same thing with whenever it comes to cheat meals and going out and stuff. I've just enjoyed eating clean and eating and feeling good.
You feel so much better. Nothing's worse than like enjoying the meal, but then feeling like crap for 3, 4 hours afterwards, and in the morning feeling disgusting. Nothing.
100%.
You regret the whole meal. It ruins your experience.
Right. No, absolutely. So I prefer like clean sushi, going and getting steak or something. Like last weekend, actually, what I made was I got grass-fed beef and I put them into burger patties, and I had an egg. I did a whole egg on top of my burger with raw Parmigiano Reggiano, and I do it with real sourdough bread. And the reason I say real sourdough is two things. Number one, your sourdough needs to be flour, water, salt. If it's any more ingredients,
But
riboflavin, all that other crap, get it out. Like I get it, those are vitamins, but no, it's all added stuff. You don't need all that. So I stick to those things. But the other thing that's really big too was me and one of the MDs that I work with, we started, this was really interesting. We actually have a podcast on this where he and I started going back and forth. And I said, hey, so and so, I go, the gluten issue. I go, gluten is found in three foods: wheat, barley, rye. That's it. And what's interesting is it's only been the last 15 years that we have a gluten problem. Like, bro, when I was a kid, we never had freaking gluten problems, dude. Nobody had a gluten problem. And so, not only that, we're the only country with a gluten problem.
we
And
see some of the
so,
blue zones eat gluten all the time.
dude, all the time, it's one of their staples. And
Yeah.
so, one of the things that I started doing some research on, I started going, okay, here's my problem. All of my nutritional data, all of my pillars, everything has come from the Bible. So every time I have these questions like fruits or vegetables, what do I do? Or gluten, what do I do? I just go to the Bible and I say, what does the scripture say? And then I'm just going to go from there. And that's always been my foundation. Like Jesus says, if the word is your rock, you will never stumble. So it's my rock. It's what I stand on. Whatever science says, I don't really care. Science just backs up what my revelations are from the Bible. So I went to the Bible. I said, okay, Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 8. God tells Israel, I'm giving you 8 foods in the promised land. Now, he gave him much more, but he was saying, I have 8 foods that are delicacies for you. They're going to be awesome. What's funny is one of them's honey. Pretty much all of them are fruit, except for 2 of them. And it's wheat and barley. And the reason this hit me was I go, why would God give us a promised food that's going to kill us? Okay. So I go, gluten is not the problem. Gluten's found in wheat. Gluten's not the problem. So then what's the freaking problem? Why are we having all these issues with gluten here?
They've manipulated our foods so much, man.
So this is where I started getting with the MD that I work, that one of the MDs that I work with, and I said, "Hey, so," and I go, "What are your thoughts on this?" I go, "My thoughts are that I think that the wheat that we have is processed." He goes, "According to everything you're saying in the medical literature in other countries," he goes, "I would agree because wheat is not a problem. Wheat in and of itself is not a problem." So what I did was I went, "Hey, okay, let me go and research what is the type of wheat that we get in Israel, Greece, or Israel, Greece, and Italy. What are the wheats that they use? Because that's their main food. Italy, that's what they eat every day. They eat pasta
Yeah.
every day. So what I found was really interesting. What they have is called a soft wheat. That's the wheat that they actually have is a soft wheat. We have a hard wheat. So all of my wheat, I actually have it. It's called Caputo. You can get it on Amazon, but you can also import it. I get it imported from Italy. It's a wheat that I have in my pantry right now, and it's what I'll make my pizzas with or anything else for that matter. And it's called a soft wheat. And soft wheat naturally is the wheat that they were having in Israel, what God was promising. And the gluten content is radically suppressed. So they're actually having a soft wheat that is genuinely good for us, loaded with nutrients that was way less in gluten in the first place. And so this is the reason why I'll tell you what, I remember I had a sourdough made with soft wheat. No problem. I ate a whole pizza with this wheat. I made it at home, made a whole pizza with it. I had a sourdough sandwich from sourdough that was not made with soft wheat. I was in bed 30 minutes later. I was dead tired. It just made me so sleepy right away. So I always tell people, hey, listen, learn how to make your own sourdough, find flour, water, salt, and get this soft wheat that you can just get from Amazon, this, that, and the other. That is the best thing because sourdough is actually very good for you. It's actually very good for the gut microbiome, lactobacillus, all these different things, right? So I know that you're like a sourdough king, dude. You have like a
Oh, dude, I do a loaf every week, but I send around some of my training, and we can always get into kind of timing different food, but I don't really think that's a huge picture there.
no, yeah.
But we
No,
we see people even with gluten intolerances do fine with sourdough, kind of like what you're hitting on, or go travel across the countries and have different types of gluten from other countries. And like you said, the soft type of gluten, beautiful, works just fine
yeah,
with it. And they don't
yeah,
have
dude.
issues. And
Absolutely.
it's the same argument in a way with the raw dairy versus conventional dairy.
In what way?
Just the fact that like you look at some of this other types of bread, right? It's not on point as always, but you look at like pasteurized heated up milk versus some of this bread that's unprocessed or processed too much, and then compare it to a sourdough or compare it to a quality one from another country, and then compare that to like the raw milk. It's a similar structure of what we're eating, but the sources and the way it's actually raised and prosperously contained changes the reaction on the body.
No, 100%. Absolutely, dude. Absolutely. Man, I think that this is a worthy conversation for the first pillar in order for people to start to grasp a little bit of these things and start to just reflect, question things, study some things out, and start to go about things a little bit differently. The other thing too that before we even get off is there are certain nut butters that I think are good. We see pistachios, we see almonds, things like this that are written in the scripture. I think those are fine. I think there's a lot of controversy. Hey, I heard nut butters are bad and nut butters are good and blah blah. And I'm like, you know what, dude? Like they're fine. I find them in scripture. I find them do a lot of benefits depending on what you're doing and so forth. And hey, you know what? If it's a way to get people off of bad things, like one thing I do to get people off of bad food is I'll say, hey, anytime you're craving something, get a rice cake, a brown rice cake, put peanut or put almond butter on it, load it with fruit, and top that thing with honey. And if you want to put like cacao nibs or something like that, and I have a couple of my clients, they say, Nick, I look forward to this every single night.
Oh, it's like a dessert. And people think eating healthy has to be not very palatable. It can be a beautiful, tasteful thing that you look forward to.
100%.
You train your body to do that. You train it to crave certain things.
Yeah.
And in nutrition, I feel like we could go on for hours and hours and get into things like the short chain fatty acids, the different types of fat sources, cooking fats. But this is definitely a great point to at least get the mind going, get the curiosity going, and reminding people to continuously ask why. We have to challenge these beliefs that we're hearing across the world and go to the root of why we think this actually matters and how it affects our body.
No, that's right. That's good. I didn't even honestly, that's a really good point that I didn't even think about going into the fiber concepts.
Yeah, just how important fiber is, or even like cooking instructions. We heat up a beautiful
Yeah,
anti-inflammatory omega-3, like extra virgin olive oil. If you heat that thing up enough, it can turn into an omega-6, a pro-inflammatory oil. And we look at, like for me personally, I always cook with cast iron. And I look at things when I cook, I'm either using very light extra virgin olive oil or like a 0 calorie spray, whether it's avocado oil or just some type of quality oil across the board. But usually I'll try to use saturated fats to some degree just because they actually have it's a single bonded structure. So they're a little bit more stable under higher heats. And I always tell people there's a difference between a smoking point and an oxidation point. When does
yeah,
that oil become damaged and that bond becomes damaged? And when can the integrity be supported? And that's where I see the ghee butter, the organic grass-fed ghee butter, even a grass-fed butter might be better than heating up an extra virgin olive oil.
yeah. No,
And
that's true.
always using those omega-3s afterwards, using them cold pressed afterwards, so you can get the beautiful benefits of anti-inflammatory effects.
No, absolutely. One of the things too is that I talk about how we always talk about probiotics and people don't really know what that is. People just say, oh, I'll take a probiotic. Probiotic is just good gut bacteria. It's just commensals. That's all it is. Like you're literally just you're putting commensals into your gut microbiome. That's a probiotic. But probiotics, if they don't are not fed by prebiotics, they will die in 14 days. Right. So just because you take a probiotic doesn't do anything because the probiotic's job is to produce postbiotics. But the only reason it can produce postbiotics is because you feed it prebiotics. prebiotics have to feed the probiotic that you're taking. If you don't have prebiotics in your diet to feed the probiotics, you have no postbiotics, which is the whole reason you take a probiotic. Otherwise, you're wasting $50 a bottle on this freaking probiotic for no reason. Prebiotics are literally found only in one food on the planet: plants. That's it. There's no animal protein, there's no animal foods that have any prebiotic fiber. All prebiotic is fiber that is fat. We have soluble and insoluble. So certain fibers in plant foods, oatmeal, fruits, vegetables, legumes, all those things, those prebiotics, every time you eat those prebiotics, those prebiotic fiber, you feed the probiotic in the gut, and the probiotic creates postbiotic short chain fatty acids like butyrate, which are the most anti-inflammatory compounds that can possibly run through the body, calming the immune system, breaking down biofilms, loading up, you're creating vitamins in your body,
helping to tighten the junctions of the gut. And we see
tighten the junctions of the gut.
up is huge, anti-inflammatory, helping autoimmune, all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. So there's so many of these different types of things that to me are extremely key and critical that we need to be knowing. Honestly, this is stuff. There's two things we did not learn in high school that we should have learned. Dude, I cannot tell you to this day.
I have my two. I'm curious to hear yours. I know
Bro,
exactly what I'm thinking.
bro, first of all, I'll tell you my two in a second. The thing is, they taught me about what are there, 9 planets? I don't even know how many planets there are. Like there's like 9, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know any NFL players anymore.
Yeah, I think they found a new planet like 2 weeks ago. I don't know, dude. Whatever. Let's call it 9. Let's call it 9 for just simplicity. They taught me starting in like 2nd grade through 12th grade, probably why I failed school and dropped out of high school. But they taught you which planet goes around the sun first or whatever. Do you want to know how many times I've used that knowledge in my life ever? 0.
I know how many I have.
Yeah, I don't even remember what it was, let alone how much I've used it. Like I'm trying to use it right now and I can't even quote it to you. But the two things we never learned and we should have learned, because it's the two biggest detriments in America right now, actually, is nutrition and finance.
Yep.
We should have learned how to eat right, truly, genuinely, not according to the standards that feed the pesticidal garbage crap. But then also, given that over almost 70% of America doesn't have retirement and they don't know how to handle their funds, those two things
trying to prepare us for the future in the real world, and we know the proof sourcing of the data that those are the two biggest struggles in America right now.
Yeah.
Why are we not working on that? And that's why this is a whole nother topic, but that's why meet my girlfriend Nita, I'm probably leaning on homeschooling to some degree, or like some
Dude, I'm so about that. I'm so about it, bro.
That would be a whole nother discussion, but man, it's like, there are things that we don't figure out till almost it's too late. And that's why it's not even somebody's fault. Like it's not really people's fault if they don't have the opportunity to learn this kind of stuff.
No, for sure.
You can't blame them.
No, you can't. But goodness gracious, we got to wake people up to the awareness, at least. If you don't know about it, that's fine. But at least being aware that you don't know about it is important.
And I think that's where both of our passions and purposes lay, quite honestly. That's why I'm so passionate about this. So honestly,
100%.
if you change a couple hundred people's lives, that can help impact the world. It spreads like wildfire.
Dude, 100%. So the last thing I'll say, and we'll close out, is just for really more for the audience, that, these 7 pillars of disease reversal, prevention, and longevity, they're lifestyle of Eden's 7 pillars. They're not Nick Tognetti's, they're lifestyle of Eden's. And these things are actually going to be taught in my university, Lifestyle of Eden University. And the great thing about my university, the thing that I really wanted to do, which God willing will launch in Q4 of 2025, the thing that I really wanted my university to be about was not just for professionals and coaches. I wanted the average person to be able to be the doctor of their home. And so I'm simplifying this university in such a way, starting from the basics, like I said, of the first class is radical depths on all of my 7 pillars. And so I want to be able to go from the 7 pillars all the way down to the depths of osteoporosis, autoimmune diseases, in-depth dives on blood work, all these things, to where anybody can be the doctor of their own home, essentially. Now, granted, will you still probably need a coach and professional to help you along the way? Absolutely. But nevertheless, this is all knowledge that we should be able to have access to for our own kids, for our parents, for our families, and so forth, okay? So anyway, man, Larry, this has been great, dude. I appreciate you joining me on this one, and I look forward to having you on again, man.
It's an honor to be on, man. Super, super excited. I think this message needs to be spread as wide as we can reach it.
Absolutely. Guys, until next time, be sure to tune in to the next Lifestyle of Eden podcast. Have a
Thank
good
you.
one. See you soon.